I'm Abby Messler,
I'm Jennifer Kaczynski.
and our study is on eidetic memory. The title of our paper is Eidetic Memory, Is It Real and Reliable in Children? So to start off, what is eidetic memory? It's not true photographic memory like most people think. To compare the two, imagine you are in a lecture for school and you can picture your teacher saying this one topic, so while you're taking the test, you kind of imagine yourself in lecture, versus true photographic memory would be implying that you have your textbook and you look through the pages, and now you can flip through those pages in your head and see the information verbatim, like you're looking at a sheet of paper in front of you. So the difference in terms of psychology terms would be an after image versus a true image. Feynman and Shabbat in 2017 did a study on this, and sometimes the way to distinguish eidetic memory from what we consider true photographic memory is when we have an emotional pairing to it. So this emotional pairing can come immediately during the event that is being remembered, and then it also follows through after with remembering it. You feel that same emotion and you kind of can imagine yourself in that place. And this implies that we have short-term and long-term components in eidetic memory, which is something that we'll touch on a little bit later.
Okay, so next we're going to be talking about eidetic memory in children versus adults. So eidetic memory is believed to be a function of age, in which the ability to have eidetic memories lessens as a person becomes older. So in a study conducted by Gyre, Alkin, Vault, and Rudin in 1976, 280 students between the ages of 5 and 18 years old viewed a set of 4 images, 2 black and gray silhouettes and 2 full-colored pictures, for 30 seconds each. After the 30 seconds was up, the image would quickly be removed, and participants would be instructed to report what they remembered seeing. Gyre et al. Found that students' eidetic memory ability decreased with age. This suggests that a normal process of cognitive development involves the decrease of eidetic memory development beginning at a fairly early age. In a similar study, Generelli, 1976, conducted eidetic memory tests on a set of sisters 46 years after they were initially tested for eidetic memory abilities. The sisters were shown a series of 7 white cards with a black circle of varying size drawn on the card. The sisters were then instructed to project the circle they saw onto a black square. At the initial time of testing, both of these sisters show a great eidetic memory ability. However, 46 years later, when this experiment was conducted again, both sisters showed a sharp decline in their ability to have eidetic memory, resulting in almost no ability to project the circle to the square. This again shows that eidetic memory is a function of age in which children show the most eidetic memory ability.
So what aids in the memory performance of children in terms of eidetic memory and just remembering general sensory information? It was initially thought that children's memory, when you think of children's memory, is a very simple thing, a simple process. But through a couple different studies, the 3 more detailed aspects that we're going to pull out are multisensory modalities, so remembering based on different senses, pre-training the brain before you're teaching those children, and then looking at the visual cortex and how it aids us in remembering multiple things. So the first study was done by Heikkila and Tipana in 2015. They took a group of school-aged children, and they did it in 2 steps. The first was encoding. So the way they did it, they gave them a source via like a sound or whatnot, and an image, and then they did it in a couple different ways. So sometimes it was an image and a noise, sometimes it was an image and then a little clip of a video. So it was this image paired with a secondary sensory input. And then the second step of it was recognition, where they took those children immediately after giving them that encoded source, and they paired it original images and some external images that they hadn't seen yet, and saw how their recall was, whether, did you see this image before or not? And those images that were paired with a secondary sense, they recalled them much better. There's a much higher rate. And this makes us wonder about the misinformation effect, because that would show the opposite of it. So obviously it's not present in children, so that makes us question, is there a difference in children versus adults for the misinformation effect? Which ties into the next study of Moran in 2013. And they took common sounds and they paired them with images, and then they just took common sounds themselves, and they kind of mixed up who got what. And this was also done on adults. Like I said, the studies that misinformation effect over age differences. And the recognition was higher with the sound, so it makes us think that that multisensory modality is the same across all age groups, that the more senses you can interpret or intertwine with it, the better it is for the mind to recall that sensory information. And these are basically a retrieval cue, so anytime they hear that sound or see that image, they now have an easier way to recall what they've previously seen. And this could be a question of what happens when you pair it with like an incorrect sound, or back to the last one, if you take a noise and a video clip and you kind of pair them incorrectly, like a monkey and a bird, how would that fall into remembering? And also it could be that this can lead to a retrieval failure where these people need to have the sound and the photograph to remember it as easily and as fast, whereas if they just had one or the other, the retrieval error effect would be a lot stronger because they're so used to seeing those two together that it's hard to recognize them separately. And then pre-training was our second aspect of children's memory and how it isn't simple, it's complex. And this is Hoffman and Hawkins in 1980. They took a group of young children and toddlers and they pre-trained them. They had 4 different ways of pre-training them. And each time over the course of these images and recording how they recalled them and how accurate they were, when the pre-training occurred, it was over and over again way higher than when there was no pre-training. So this makes us wonder if that image, the longer you pre-train, it gives your body and your mind a better chance to capture that eidetic image and associate all the feelings and your current sensations with what you're seeing. And then the third and final aspect of how children's memory is complex would be by Mieneke, Bolowski, and Thewis, and this was in 2012. And they looked at a shift of attention and using the working short-term memory while given 2 different stimulus. So they put people in an fMRI, and then they studied the reactions, and they memorized different stimuli while they were hooked up to the fMRI. Half of the people were given one stimulus and told to focus solely on that one, and then half the people were given a stimulus, and then you could say distracted with another stimulus. And they looked at which parts of the brain light up when they're given 2 stimulus and how their brain handles that information. And it turns out that those people that were given a secondary stimulus to remember along with the original, they had light-ups in their visual cortex, and that implies that there's almost a mental imagery going on where they store that and store a picture of it, and they can actually keep visual images of multiple things in their short-term memory and not just one at a time if they utilize that visual cortex.
Okay, so next we're going to be talking about factors that lead to vivid memories in children. So when it comes to vivid memory recall, minute details can either enhance or impede memory recall in children. So since memories are reconstructions of events, they may be more subject to fabrication and change, leading to vivid yet inaccurate memories. So Hessen, Kafitz, and Scobria in 2012 presented 82 participants with 3 non-altered photographs from their childhood and 1 altered photograph from their childhood, containing a detail that they had never seen before. So the participants were instructed to examine this photo and were told to imagine themselves within that moment pictured in the photograph. So Hessen, Kafitz, and Scobria found that unfamiliar details lowered the participants' feelings of familiarity with the photographs. So these results suggest that an ease in processing may lead us to conclude that our sense of familiarity with an image is because we've experienced the stimulus before, thus leading to more vivid memories. So along with notable details from an event, emotion may play a big part in the vividness of memories. So Bywaters, Andrade, and Turpin in 2008 studied 80 students on their vividness of memory recall during highly emotional stimuli. So participants viewed 25 images ranging from either neutral to highly arousing, and then the participants were asked to rate these images based on balance, arousal, and emotionality levels. Then the participants were presented with a distractor task, and then afterwards were asked to recall images and rewrite their qualities. So Bywaters et al. Found that images rated as highly arousing were found to have high levels of valence and were more vividly remembered. This suggests that the emotional value of a stimulus plays a large role in the vividness of memory recall. So emotional arousal has been shown to play a large role in memory recall. However, could a combination of emotional arousal and physiological arousal have the same effects? So Liebachman, Nichols, Whitehead, and Griffith and Thomas in 1999 studied 80 students and the effect that physiological and emotional arousal had on memory performance. So participants either took part in a physiologically arousing activity, which was running in place or not, or they didn't partake in any sort of physiological activity. So participants then viewed images ranging from neutral to highly emotionally arousing. And it was found that physiological arousal had little to no impact on memory performance. So emotional qualities of images mattered the most when we were talking about memory recall.
So for our future study, based on that previous research that we let you know about, is we would hypothesize that infants and younger children aren't subject to those bias and previous memories and the schematas that some of the adults and older children would have. So they'll be better able to vividly and accurately remember different stimuli and the details. However, we do want to add a little caveat in there that older children and young adults recognize more arousing images based on their previous memories and kind of the flashbulb effect. And this is more of a recognition and not a recall. So some clarification of what exactly we're studying could help with that, because they're recognizing that event from a previous experience, not recalling it from the study that we're doing and what they've seen. In our participant group, we have 300, so we have a large population of ages ranging in 5 different categories. We have an infant, a toddler, school-age child, a teenager, and a young adult. And it would be 50-50 on the gender, so we'd have 50% be female, 50% be male to try to even out anything that could come with error from gender. And within these groups of people, we would have them all go through the same procedure where the materials are with 3 groups of photos, and these photos are all chosen from the International Affective Picture System, which is ranks photos based on their emotional arousal. So these 3 groups would be negatively arousing, neutrally arousing, and positively arousing. And then within each 3 groups, we'd have 5 pictures just to have enough wiggle room to get the appropriate amount of data. These participants would all be shown the images in a group, and then after they've been shown them, they'll get 5 minutes to sit and kind of either think about them or distract themselves, whichever happens. And then individually, they'll be shown one by one 10 photos from each group. So physically or positively arousing, negatively arousing, and then in the middle, a neutrally arousing group. And we have 5 extra photos shown in there. That's why I said 10. And they'd be shown them one by one. And this helps because then they have a chance to not compare or kind of try to make a group of photos that they think they saw or use any recall techniques. So the adults will rate that on a Likert scale, 5 different levels from extremely negatively arousing to extremely positively arousing with positive, negative, and neutral in between. And then the younger children, like toddlers and infants, will look at the different kind of reactions that the researchers get from them. And this will show us a way of subjectively evaluating.
So if our results did support our hypothesis, they would show that infants and young children had more accurate and vivid remembrance of images that were presented. Additionally, older age groups would show a tendency to recognize emotionally arousing images. However, the consistency of which these photos were remembered in this group would vary due to the fact that remembrance would be based on personal biases and stereotypes that the older adults may have, thus using their top-down processing. If the results did not support our hypothesis, they would show that infants and young children have less vivid and accurate memories of images, and this may be caused by a lack of development and storage available and working in short-term memory of young people. Additionally, older age groups would have equal tendency to recognize emotionally arousing images and neutral images. Memory in these groups will be based on personal experience. Memory based on personal experience would not influence these older age groups. Working memory may allow older people to remember more information more easily.
Limitations for our future study have a couple different aspects to it. The first is that the younger participants can't respond due to the frontal cortex and the parietal lobes not being developed for speech and recognition, that type of thing. They might not be able to understand the tasks that we're giving them, so this could come into effect just because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, but also the intent of learning doesn't play any effect on memory, so that aspect will be going for us. Second is that the younger participants aren't going to be biased with those schematas like the older participants would be, and along with schematas and having prior memories and prior experiences, older participants, based on the late model selection theory, they have a lot of data and just input that they've gotten over the years floating around in their head, and when they do need to recall something, they have more to process, and this is called the fan effect. It just takes a longer time and it can be more difficult to figure out what they're trying to remember. Another problem would be that with the older group, they have associations of groups and people, so maybe the fact that we're both female researchers could influence images that they think they saw, and obviously these are all unconscious factors going into this, but maybe that it's a psychological study and they know that they are supposed to be studying a certain topic or the images all kind of rotate around the same thing, and they're going to associate those and assume that they've seen images that they haven't. The other issue with this would be that it is self-reported, which is extremely subjective. They might have a different perception of emotions or how emotions are felt and what emotions mean to them, and that's just how their individual brains interpret those photos that we're giving them. And it also is subjective in the fact that how us as researchers are going to watch those infants and see the different reactions they give us, whether it'll be body language, facial expressions, noises that they make, where they're looking at type of thing. And those younger ones especially, but also both groups, they're looking for praise and responses. So if an infant responds with, that they recognize an image that was correct, we might not even realize that we're doing it, but show a different facial expression that says we're excited about something. And they might be prone to respond the same way with future images, whether they've seen them or not. This ties into the adults give us what we want. So they're in a psychological study based on memorizing and seeing the emotional reaction. So they might think that they have to give a reaction, whether it be emotional, positive or emotional negative, and they might not have any neutral, or maybe they'll be overthinking their emotions and overestimate or underestimate.
Okay, so there are several ways the results of the present study can be used for future directions. So since eidetic memory has been shown to be present among young children, but then diminish into adulthood, this could lead to future directions of how adults can use eidetic memory. So in a study done by Sanders et al. In 2008, they proposed that using mental imagery as a learning technique in order to remember material rather than using textbook information to remember material was best. So they found that mental imagery techniques transferred learning from practice to application better than purely through textbook study did. So in order to test this, a future study could be done to see whether mental imagery helps adults to maintain vivid memories of a stimuli. Additionally, rather than focusing on vividly remembering photos and visual stimuli, like the present study focused on, a future study could be done to examine eidetic memory in terms of remembering verbal stimuli or other stimuli such as tactile, smell, or taste. So research has often been focused on a person's ability to recall and recognize images and other visual stimuli. There has been some evidence to show that young children are fairly good at this. However, it is possible that these results would be different if a future study was focused on a participant's ability to remember verbal stimuli or another form of sensory stimuli. Additionally, a future study could look at the cultural aspects of eidetic memory, since the present study didn't focus on any cultural aspects. And additionally, a future study could focus on state-dependent factors of state of mood or life.
Implications of the study that we proposed, we have two major ones. The first is that you could use it for eyewitness testimonies in different court cases. And the main aspect of it is how valid is the memory that people are recalling in these court cases. And from what we learned, that adults kind of tend to focus more on those personal experiences and schematics that they have in their head, and that it might be harder to recall, that adults might not be as reliable as children in that sense, and they're kind of filling in the holes with what they expect to be in those holes. And basically it says that the general knowledge that we have of psychology and remembering things might not be as applicable as personal psychology, figuring out individuals and their stories and their train of thought, any biases that they might have in their lives. And the second would be schooling and education, especially for those younger children, that if they don't rely so much on what they're getting as far as the actual input, but they rely on the feedback that they're getting from those in a position of leadership or like as a researcher or teacher. So when you get positive, negative feedback in schooling, we call those grades. And when you get those, it could cause a challenge for the student, and they might be set back. And it's been proven that when they give a negative feedback, their memory decreases and a positive feedback increases. So maybe rather than having a grading scale, given real-life tasks and applications where they're set up to be successful but still get that learning experience.
So in conclusion, true photographic memory, in which people remember exact images and videos in their memory, has not been scientifically proven to exist. However, eidetic memory, which is similar to photographic memory, has been scientifically proven. Eidetic memory has been shown to be present primarily during childhood and diminish as a child ages. This may be because eidetic memory is crucial in the early development of a child's cognitive processing. However, there are many other factors that may contribute to one's ability to use eidetic memory. So the present study focused on the relationship between eidetic memory and emotional arousal. It was believed that because infants and young children have not been subject to bias and stereotypes like young adults and adults have, that they will be better able to vividly and more accurately remember unbiased details from a stimulus. So in conclusion, there is still much that can be learned about the topic of eidetic memory. It is a rather beneficial ability that still has many factors that need to be explored.